I got married early, at the age of 17, carrying my daughter under my heart. Our mothers decided for us to rent a house so that we could live as our family. They searched for a long time, but I had to give birth in a month. And then my mother-in-law found it. We went to look. As soon as I saw this house, I immediately felt somehow uncomfortable. It was very cold inside. There was a kitchen, a corridor, a hall, and 3 rooms. Immediately, there is a corridor. To the right is the kitchen. Straight along the corridor is the bedroom. To the left is the hall. And you go through the hall, 2 rooms. Of course, I decided that I would create comfort myself, and everything would be fine. We spent the whole day transporting things. The parents left in the evening, and the husband's brother stayed to help further in the morning. We went to bed in the hall. I'm just falling asleep, and then a scream pulls me out of my sleep. I see my husband squatting on the sofa. I turn on the light. Sashka, his brother, runs into the hall and asks what happened here, saying that I almost fell out of bed. He was sleeping in the room. The husband just turns his head and doesn't say a word. I thought he was having a nightmare. I went to the toilet. When I came, he was already asleep. In the morning I asked him, and he answered, I dreamed, but I don't remember what exactly. A month passed like this. During this time, some sounds and rustling noises were heard at night, but I convinced myself that it was a brownie, and therefore not scary. During this month, my relationship with my husband became, to put it mildly, terrible. He started drinking heavily and didn't come home. I called his sister to spend the night with me. I gave birth to a daughter in February. 2 weeks after being discharged from the maternity hospital, my husband again did not come to spend the night. Now I would throw him out into the street, but then I sat at home and waited for him to calm down. After all, we have love. His mother spent 1 night with me. His sister spent the 2nd and 3rd, and on the 4th everyone had work to do. I took care of the child all day, and when night came, I lay down on the bed with my daughter. Less than half an hour had passed when a noise was heard in the corridor. I tried to listen, but the low-volume radio was disturbing me. I'm trying to calm myself down. It just seemed like it. The night light is on in the room. The atmosphere seems cozy, but my heart is beating so hard that my ears are blocked. My daughter falls asleep, and I decide to put her in her crib. Just as I lower my feet from the bed, I clearly hear some rustling in the corridor. My heart sank. I felt so wildly scared that I started crying. Hugging my daughter and covering myself with a blanket, I prayed that everything would disappear. I don't know how much time passed. I really wanted to go to the toilet, but the fear was stronger. I don't know how, but I fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, it was already light. My first thought was that I dreamed. Getting up, I left the room and almost screamed. In the corridor near the threshold, the rug was folded back. I went up to fix it, lifted the rug with my foot, and heard a familiar rustling sound. Then I realized that it was the rug that rustled at night. Then they tried to roll it up. The sound was the same. I started to panic wildly. My first thought was, run. While I was packing my things, my brother came. I rushed to him and told him about last night. He, of course, didn't believe it. I even laughed. Then my friends arrived, and I began to reassure myself that maybe he had somehow curled up on his own. As the night wore on, my confidence began to wane. I asked you not to leave me alone. The friends left, but the brother stayed. I asked him to lie down in the room with us. I made a bed for him on the floor and, with a calm soul, lay down with my daughter. The lights in the hallway and kitchen were left on. While breastfeeding my daughter, I listened, but everything was quiet. I was about to doze off when I heard the same rustling noises again. I almost went crazy with fear. I wanted to call my brother, but I couldn't. My whole body was numb. Then she began to call him with force, but he, as always, was sleeping in such a way that you couldn't wake him up with a tank. Then I started pinching him. He woke up, and I whispered to him, "Do you hear?" He listened and widened his eyes. He jumped up, sat down on the bed, and whispered, "What is this?" And at the entrance to our room, there were closed curtains. We look, and there are some shadows on the curtains. It's clear that someone is there. I became hysterical from horror. The brother says, "Maybe these are thieves." And then to himself, "Damn, what thieves? He closed everything himself." And then something happened that made me lose consciousness. The curtains opened. I came to my senses because my brother was hitting me on the cheeks. My daughter was crying. I grabbed my daughter and pressed her to me. My brother was shaking. I asked what happened, and he said that I screamed so much that he was deafened. Marishka woke up and started screaming, and then he saw that I fainted and began to clap my cheeks. While he was telling me this, I looked at the curtains. They were open. I point with my finger. I can't speak myself. She gave her daughter the breast to calm her down. The brother suggests, let's get up together, get dressed, wrap Marushka up and run out. It's easy to say, let's run out to where there is something. Later, he had the idea to break the window with a chair and jump out. I show him to the window. There are bars there. We sit silently with our feet on the bed, and then we clearly heard footsteps, heavy steps. I couldn't stand it and cried out loud. We understood that this was coming to us. It became very cold. Suddenly a voice was heard, so hissing. It's impossible to describe. We jumped up from the bed. Panic began. I shouted, Lord, save us, I beg you. I fell to my knees with my daughter in my arms, screaming for the Lord to protect us, that my child was afraid, that she was so small. My brother simply covered his face with his hands and stood on his knees, and then it suddenly became warm, as if someone had blown hot air. The brother shouted, quickly, let's get dressed. I grab my daughter and start dressing her, while my brother throws things at me. We rush out into the corridor. There is complete destruction. The wallpaper is in shreds. The carpet is bent. Things are scattered from the hanger. I had my daughter in my arms, otherwise I would have collapsed. We rushed to the door, grabbing our down jackets and felt boots as we went. They opened the door and found themselves in the hay. Then I remembered that there was no light there. By touch, stepping on each other, we reached the door. My brother opened the latch, pushed the door, but it did not open. I shouted, what is it? Open it. He pushes me away and flies into the veranda. I'm behind him. I can't understand anything. Just save me. Have mercy. I hear a ringing and cracking sound. I understand that he broke the glass. I hear him jump out the window. I am alone with the child. She is crying. It seems to me that an eternity has passed in this loneliness. I shout, Dennis. I hear a crash and my brother's voice calling me. I jump out onto the porch and see my brother rolling the stroller out of the entryway. He threw it to the gate. We run to the gate and then we hear the door slamming. We jumped out of the gate. My brother dragged the stroller out and slammed the gate. We ran until we were behind an alley. Denise pulled out a blanket from his bosom and put it in the stroller. They placed my daughter there. It's good that my knitted hat was in the sleeve of my down jacket and my brother's hat remained in the house. I took my daughter's panties out of my bag and put them on his head. We buttoned them up and went. They walked in complete silence for about 10 minutes. And then we stopped. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my mind. Dennis jumped away from the stroller and he began to vomit, literally turn out. Then we hugged and cried. They just roared. Our daughter woke up again and we had to pull ourselves together. So we walked to our parents' house. It was snowing so much. It's good that there was no severe frost. I asked what happened to the door, why it didn't open. Brother says there was a lock on it. I was shocked. Who closed us? When we passed by the bar, we saw our friend's car. We came up to them to take us, and when they saw us, they started laughing. After all, Dennis had pants on his head. Then one of them, Leka, says, by the way, how did you get out? Cool, I was making fun of you. He didn't have time to finish. His brother hit him so hard that he fell backwards. Then my brother took me by the hand and said, we'll get there on foot. Since then, Leka and I have not communicated. Coming home, we did not sleep until the morning. The next day, my brother got together with his friends and went to that house. Everything there was turned upside down. They collected all my things and furniture, loaded them, and took them away. Let's go give the key to the owner of the house. Her brother began to ask her who lived in this house. She said that her grandparents. The grandfather once went underground and died there, and the grandmother, without waiting for the grandfather, went to check on him and also died. They were grabbed only a week later, so the house went to my granddaughter. But she has a comfortable apartment, and she sold the house. The buyer came 2 weeks later and almost took the money back with an axe.